In this video, I take my VDB volume that was generated in Houdini, import it into Blender, and demonstrate how to set up a volume material rendered in Eevee. I'll use the velocity attribute of the volume and remap it to a color ramp to make it easier to capture all the velocity data and translate it into color values that the material can interpret for rendering. Using attributes to drive the material makes the volume more interesting to render out. This video is a direct continuation from a previous project, so this is part 2. Part 1 explains how to export it from Houdini. You might think that's nice. Now, how do we actually set up a material for this smoke? Right now, we're looking the smoke in the viewport, so it's not the render quality. Now, how do we switch over to the render mode? Come over here, up here, you'll see you can view it in what we currently have is just the viewport, the plain viewport solid material. In Blender, you can even apply a matte cap to the viewport shading to make it look nice while you debug your scene. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to try to keep it simple. It doesn't affect your renders. It's just looks nice while you're developing your scene. So you can click this. This is the render mode. Now I can hardly see anything. That's because we don't have, we have this point light, but it's really far and it's really small. So let's fix that first. This is what we see as render. This is actually what it's going to look like when we render it. So we can come here and toggle the camera. So this is what the camera sees. In order to show you, to render it out, to render image, come here to render image. So this is actually what we see. So we don't see much. We can make it out. It is rendering. We can see that. Let's just close this. And see how fast that was too? I just wanted to mention, but there's no materials on here, so that doesn't really count, I guess. So the light, let's click this light and let's change this light. So in order to get the properties of this light, come down here. So select the light here, come down here, and you see this light bulb. That's a point light. We have a sunlight. Okay, that's too much. Spotlight and area light. Now let's fix the position of the area light. Let me zoom out. Okay, so the area light is pointing down here. Now, one of the awesome things about Blender's viewport is that it's very easy to change the position of the light. You see this yellow dot here? Just click and drag it, and you can change exactly where the light will point to. I find this super convenient. And remember, this is what we're rendering. This is the render quality. What we see in the viewport is what we're rendering because we have selected it in render mode. If you want it a faster performance, we can just choose the regular solid shading. So this is not what it will look like when we render it out, but it has way faster performance. This can be used when you're still setting up the scene, but I'm just going to leave it in the render mode. Now you can change the strength of the area light, the power. So you can do 2000. It looks a lot brighter. Okay, let's attach material onto this. Now to attach a material, we need to go into shading mode. So in order to change the mode, right now we have the 3D viewport taking up the entire screen. We cannot set up materials in this viewport. What we need to do is we need to change the editor. We need to change it to shader editor. So this is the shading mode. Let's select the smoke. And we don't have anything here. That's our little cloud icon is hinting to us that this is the smoke object. This is the material tab, or the material properties tab. You can see here it's all empty. We don't have a material attached to it. That's because we haven't created one. So let's create one in this material editor. There's a handy new button right here. Just click on it. It automatically detects that this is a smoke object, and it creates a principal shader for the volume and attaches it to the volume shader. Now that's awesome, but we can't see our volume. So it's nice to set up the material while we have the volume, while we see it in the viewport. Now, one of the awesome things about Blender is that you can split the screen very easily. If you come over here to the top right hand corner of this active panel, just click and drag it down. It splits just like that. Then you can come up here, and that's how we change our editor. This right here. So I'm going to go back to 3D viewport because I want to see the volume on the top and then set up the material on the bottom. This is usually how I have it set up. So you can always resize it too if you click and drag this. Okay, in order to navigate in the shader editor, it's actually the same thing as the viewport. Middle mouse, click and drag in order to pan. And in order to zoom in and out, you just use the mouse wheel. So let's set up the material for this. Now let's change it back to render mode for the viewport so we actually see what we're changing. Okay, so it brings in the temperature automatically right here. So if we change this, so that's the temperature here that we have imported over. Okay, let's change the black body intensity. Okay, we're starting to see it. When we have it at 1, we can start to see it really get brighter and red, more red in the middle. You can change the frame, just dragging the playhead as I go through. So you can get really, really hot. Now that's not something I want, so I'm just going to drag it back down. Now this automatically brings in the density and the temperature attributes. It does not bring in the velocity or the heat. Now you can change this to heat though. You can just overwrite temperature to heat. So this is the heat that's driving this volume shader. I'm just going to change it back to temperature. Have the mouse that's hovering over the bottom panel here, Shift A. So that I want to add another node. Come to input and I need an attribute. So this is what I want because I want to bring in the velocity attribute. So just type in the name of the attribute, which would be vel.x. So velocity has 3 primitives. So we need 3 of these. So select this and then Shift D to make a copy of this. So you can go like that and let's change the name to vel.y. Now you can also Shift click here and just go here and do the same thing. Get the attribute again in order to get one of these. So let's go vel.z. Now how do we put this together in order to feed it into the color? So let's drag all this and just move it over a bit first. Now let's Shift A and let's see what we have. There's a converter here, and what we want to do is combine X, Y, Z. That's exactly what we want to do. So let's take this. I know it's called color. I don't just it's the value. This is going to give me the value of vel.x, vel.y, and vel.z. If we feed this directly into the color, well, we do get results. You may want to remap this to a 0 to 1 range because the velocity values here may not be, they may be astronomically huge. So it might be a good idea to come here and in the converter, add a map range. So after you put the map range down, we can hook this into the value. And so what's the min and max range? Well, I don't know. You'll have to see. So the result, hook this into the color. Oh, that looks a lot better now. So you can play around with this. You can drag the max up, higher. So that's what you get. You can drag it to a range, like play around with this value until you see something you like. Now the minimum, remember, velocity can have negative values as well. So you can drag this down to get negative values, to capture all the negative values as well. Otherwise it gets clamped. So this is very similar to the fit range in Houdini. I'm just going to keep this at 0. So I kind of like this. Now you can also map this into a color wrap, just like Houdini. Now let's come here, Shift A. Let's drop down a color wrap. Now if you have this and then just click in between this line, you can see if we're not hovering over it, it's not highlighted. If we're hover over it, the line gets highlighted. Left click it'll automatically hook it up for you. So let's change this color to something ridiculous to red, and you can start to see it a bit of red that it's remapping to. If we come here, black, let's change this to something ridiculous like green. So you can see that we have a lot of negative values. You can go up here. I have a lot of low values as well. Oh, that looks nice. I think I'll keep that. I lost all my green though. So let's go up a bit. You're gonna have a lot of fun playing around with that. That's how you set up a material for this. There's another part to this video that demonstrates how to set up Eevee's render settings to increase the render quality. I do a render comparison between Eevee versus Cycles. I pump up the quality of the Eevee render by configuring the render settings and try to get a quality closer to that of Cycles render. Why would I do that? Because Eevee renders a lot faster than Cycles, but Cycles gets you a really great result even with just the default settings. By configuring Eevee's render settings, we can get quality and speed. Thank you for watching and sticking to the end.